They came to America for the dream, but the streets weren't just crowded, they were a battlefield. Forget everything you think you know about organized crime. Before the suits, before Las Vegas, there was this. A world where teenage thugs became kings and protection was just a fancy word for terror. This is where a street kid's temper earned him the name Bugsy, where a quiet genius named Lansky saw a business plan into chaos. They were about to learn that the skills of the ghetto, the intimidation, the corruption, were worth more than they ever imagined, because a national ban was coming and it would turn their neighborhood gang into a national empire. This is the brutal, untold origin of the Kosher Nostra, Chapter 1.
Picture the dockyards of New York City at the turn of the century. The air is thick with coal smoke and the sound of 1,000 different languages. The steamers empty their human cargo onto the piers. They are tired, poor, huddled masses from Eastern Europe, carrying their entire lives in a single bag. They are fleeing pogroms and poverty, seeking a golden land of opportunity. They arrived with a little more than a name and the weight of what they left behind, stepping into cities that smelled of coal smoke and overcrowded tenements, where survival required constant bargaining with boredom, hunger, and the law. For most, the dream was a job in a garment shop, a small bakery, a chance for their children to rise. They crowded into neighborhoods like Lower East Side and Bronzeville, Brooklyn, some of the most densely populated places on the planet, with density levels that rivaled the modern-day Mumbai. But, for a small ruthless few, this chaos was not a barrier, it was an opportunity. In a world where the official law was distant, corrupt, or indifferent, they would write their own laws. You're looking at the birthplace of the Jewish mob. The tenements were a world unto themselves. Families of 8 or 10 crammed into a single airless room. Shared toilets in the hallways served multiple families. The stench was overwhelming. For a young man growing up here, the path to a better life was narrow, and often it was crooked. Why sew dresses for pennies when you could charge $1 for protection? The police were a presence, but not always a protective one. They were often on the take, looking the other way for a price. This created a vacuum of power, and nature abhors a vacuum. Into that vacuum stepped the street gang. Their business model was simple, brutal, and effective. It was protection. Imagine a young, tough, maybe 16 or 17-year-old kid. He swaggers up to a pushcart peddler, an older man, often from the same shtetl in the old country. The peddler's entire livelihood is right there on his cart. And the deal offered was simple and terrifying. Pay us a weekly fee, and we'll make sure nothing happens to your cart. Refuse, and we smash your goods. Break your hands, or even burn your entire stock to the ground before your own eyes. It was a tax on desperation enforced with violence, and it was the foundation of everything that was to come. And no one was better at this than Monk Eastman. If there was a king of the Jewish underworld at the dawn of the 20th century, it was Monk Eastman. Monk was a beast of a man, a brawler who kept a pet rooster and operated a sleazy dive bar. His gang, over 1,000 strong, was a small, brutal army. They were known for their uniform, a red bandana around their necks. But they were more than just thugs. They were a shadow utility for the corrupt political machine of Tammany Hall. The system was symbiotic. A Tammany politician would get Monk's men out of jail. In return, on election day, Monk's army would swarm the polling stations. They'd vote under fake names multiple times. They would intimidate opposition voters, often with brass knuckles and clubs. They'd stuff ballot boxes. It was a brutal, efficient way to keep the corrupt in power, and it gave the gangs immense political protection. Monk's signature move was the headbutt. The story goes that he'd file a notch in his skull between fights, a grisly tally of his victories. He was the old school, power through sheer violence. But this ecosystem was diverse. Another major player was Dopey Benny Fane. While Eastman was a brawler, Fane was more of an entrepreneur of violence. His gang specialized in one of the most lucrative rackets of the era, labor slugging. During a garment workers' strike, who would the factory hire to break the picket line? Gangsters. And who would the unions hire to protect their picketers and fight the strikebreakers? The same gangsters. Dopey Benny's gang was a mercenary force, hired by both sides to violently settle labor disputes. A single large strike could net a gang leader like Fane the modern equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars. This wasn't just neighborhood bullying, this was violence as a business service. Connecting the underworld directly to industry and big money. It was a critical lesson. Your muscle could be rented out to the highest bidder, and the richest bidders weren't on your street. They were in skyscrapers. But the era of a lone wolf gang leader, the one-man army like Eastman, was coming to an end. A new generation was arriving. A generation that understood that brains, organization, and partnership could build something far more powerful and lasting than sheer brutality. Now, this is where our story truly narrows its focus, not on one king, but on a partnership that would change the face of American crime. On these same gritty streets, two kids from different backgrounds were learning the same brutal lessons. Benjamin Siegel. He was a handsome, charismatic kid from Williamsburg. Even as a teenager, he possessed a violent temper so volatile, so unpredictable, that it terrified everyone who knew him. He was obsessed with style, with looking good, even as he committed awful acts. He started his own protection racket, a natural entrepreneur of violence. His ambition was never just for money, it was for status and recognition. And then he met Meyer Lansky. Now Lansky was a small, quiet and fiercely intelligent kid. Where Siegel was fire and impulse, Lansky was ice and calculation. He saw crime not as a series of fights or shakedowns, but as a business that needed strategy, a corporate structure, and above all, a healthy bottom line. While others brawled, Lansky was doing mental math. Together, they formed the Bugsy and Meyer mob. The name Bugs came from Siegel's notoriously crazy, buggy temper. It was a nickname he absolutely despised, but it stuck. Their genius was in their specialization. While older gangs like Eastman's were brawling in the streets, the Bugs and Meyer mob offered a premium, reliable service. They became the go-to muscle for other, bigger criminals. They were the enforcers, hijackers, and protectors for the gambling dens and early bootleggers. Now, if you were a bookmaker and someone owed you money, you didn't send your own guys. You hired Bugs and Meyer. They were professional service for the underworld. More reliable, more organized, and more sophisticated. They were just a new breed. But the old guard wasn't going away quietly. Gangs like Lenox Avenue Gang, led by a vicious killer named Harry Jeep the Blood Horowitz, represented the pure, unorganized savagery of the past. Horowitz and his crew were infamous for their willingness to commit pure, mindless violence, a stark contrast to the strategic approach of Lansky. This was the constant tension, the struggle between the chaotic old world and the organized new one. This was the ecosystem, a world of constant, low-level warfare, a brutal proving ground where the strong survived and the smart began to see the blueprint for an empire. They were learning how to corrupt systems, how to leverage violence for profit, and how to build networks. It was all about to change. The world of the neighborhood gang, of the protection racket and the labor slugger was a local affair, but a national event was coming that would demand a national organization. The skills they honed here, logistics, intimidation, political corruption, were about to be applied on a massive new canvas. In 1920, the United States passed the 18th Amendment. Prohibition began. The demand for illegal alcohol would create a billion-dollar black market almost overnight. And the skills these young men had honed in the ghetto, enforcement, hijacking, organization, bribery, they would suddenly be in demand and on an unprecedented scale. The bootleggers would need armies to protect their shipments and terrorize their rivals. They would need the Bugs and Meyer mob. The street gangs were about to go big time. The era of the corporate criminal was dawning, but that is a story for the next chapter. Well, that's the story of how the streets of New York forged the first Jewish gangs. I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the roots of the Kosher Nostra. Now, you might have noticed something different about this video. This one was voiced by me, personally. I know my English isn't perfect and my pronunciation might be a little off. It's not my first language, but I wanted to try something new, to make the channel feel more personal and more connected to you. If you like this episode and you like to see more content like this, it would mean the world to me if you'd leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what makes these videos possible. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.